Hey guys, I'm Ted Phaeton, founder of The Modern Man, host of the No Rain, No Rainbows podcast, anchor meteorologist for Fox Carolina in Greenville, South Carolina, and catch me on this week's episode of The Jesse T Show. I know there's a lot to unpack along the story, but a quick cliff note is I'm from New York originally, born and raised, grew up in the city, well, in Long Island, outside of the city, but I still call myself a city boy. You can take me out of the city, can't take the city out of me. After graduating from college with a degree in broadcast meteorology, had a hard time getting in the TV business. That kind of led me on a little journey, had some medical problems there, getting diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune disease focused in the large intestine. That landed me in the hospital, and that's kind of where the catalyst of my story is, where my trajectory changed. Started getting my positivity mindset after leaving the hospital within a year. Got, at the time, my dream job, which was a chance to be a meteorologist on TV in Saginaw, Michigan. Took me about 9 months to figure out how cold it was. And I ended up going to Greenville, South Carolina, where I was a weekend meteorologist for a number of years before getting the opportunity to be a morning anchor. And that transition also is kind of what sparked the start of my podcast, No Rain, No Rainbows. It's also what helped spark the start of my men's networking and empowerment group called The Modern Man. And I would say I've been on a journey of kind of just pushing to the next level and looking for growth. A lot of my posts on social always ends with "Let's grow," because my goal in life is to wake up the next day, become a little bit better, 1% better. And if anybody hasn't seen me for a couple of years and they say, "Hey Ted, you've changed," my answer is always, "Well, I'm supposed to."
Yeah, they say if you're the same as you were last year, you've had like a pretty bad year, right? Like
Yeah.
if you haven't grown, if you haven't pushed yourself, if you haven't broken comfort zones. I mean, that's the richness of life, man. I think is just those unbalanced moments that define who we are, where we come back bigger, stronger, better, faster. But at the same time, having your grace for yourself, where you're not, getting depressed because you're not where you want to be quite yet, right? And I think that so many people always put the cart before the horse, and they don't do the work, or they're not positive minded, and it kind of slows them down. And so you and I have a very common kind of part of our world that we operate in, which is this being of service to men and
Yeah.
showing up for men. um with The Modern Man and what you do, talk a little bit about how that came to, like, what was it that was put on your heart? What are the experiences that you had that you were like, man, I'd really like to show up for men better? And then talk about the actual group and what happens there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for some reason, I feel compelled to share this story. Never said it before, never shared this story before, not even sure how to articulate it. But and I don't know if anybody out there can relate, and just going to be vulnerable on the podcast here. I remember one of my first crushes in high school um didn't want to date me. And I remember thinking, okay, what's wrong? We were friends. We've all heard about the friend zone type thing. Um, and we have all heard the stories. And her story was, "Hey, you're such a good friend. I don't want to lose you." And I remember that sticking with me. And that's important because I remember crying over not being able to get this girl to date me. I remember crying, thinking, what's wrong with me? And like, I'm a great guy, and how come this girl doesn't want to date me? And I see these other dudes, these jocks, and these other guys who, in my opinion, don't treat women well, and they're getting all the girls and stuff. Well, years later, I read a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Donald Glover. And in no way is it a book about being an a-hole. It's more or less a book about learning how to set your priorities and figure out what's important. For me, that book was one of those books that I look back at, and once I started implementing, I saw the changes kind of come into fruition in my lifestyle. One case in point being my fiance. I was reading that book when me and my fiance started talking. Obviously, she wasn't my fiance at the time. She actually was just a mutual friend. And it's funny because I kind of friend zoned her because I was so focused on myself because of implementing what was in the book. Needless to say, me focusing on myself, folding my laundry one day is the first time my fiance found me attractive. So, okay, I'm
Wow.
seeing a connection here. Taking care of myself, putting myself as a priority is actually having the reverse impact of what I thought it would be. By not chasing the female finds me attractive. Another book I read was The Mask of Masculinity by Lewis Howes, and it talked about the staggering suicide rate amongst men. And I'm starting to connect these dots here. I'm seeing the service from the book No More Mr. Nice Guy, and how so many men struggle with seeking approval from others, not necessarily just women, but just other people.
Yep.
And they usually sometimes actually sacrifice their own priorities in order to do so. Another thing I was seeing was the adverse effects of mental health against men, and how a lot of men are looking for guidance. A lot of men are struggling for their purpose. They're struggling for their self worth. And we don't talk about it too much. It's kind of taboo to talk about men's empowerment, right? So as I saw this and I reflected on my life, I saw the blessings that I had of having both my mother and father in the household growing up, having a father figure, but I also saw a pattern. Aside from my father, I played sports. I had coaches. After college, my first boss, though I was kind of in a rough period at the law firm, my first boss knew me since I was 5. He took me under his wing, helped me start my first business. Moving away from home, I had a strong group of male friends that I associated with, and I leaned into them for life advice. Same thing when I got to Greenville, South Carolina. This was the pattern I had. And as I talked to more and more men, they didn't have that same pattern, and they didn't get the benefits that I was able to have by learning from the mistakes of some of the men before me. Statistically, I'm usually the youngest of my group of friends. And that's also me just seeking out men who have gone through things before me so I can learn. So the idea came as, what if we kind of made it commonplace to have men talk about their feelings and the situations that they're going through in life? Make that no longer taboo to talk about, like, hey man, yeah, I saw the game last night. Yeah, I saw the fight. Yeah, it was crazy, but hold on, I'm not okay. And I want to talk about something more than the score of the game last night. I want to talk about something more than how great Tom Brady is winning another Super Bowl ring. Maybe he's not that great. Now I'm gonna joke.
Goat. He's the goat.
But those conversations getting past the surface level is really kind of where the basis of Modern Man came in for me, because of the benefits I've seen in my life. And when I recognize how many men out there might not have that same network of friends, connections, support, it breaks my heart, and I do want to help provide that any way I can.